for backing up the class. The highway was shut down. For those of you who've been down south, know that if the highway gets shut down anywhere between Carp and the state beaches turnout, you're stuck. So anyway, thanks for your patience. Yeah. What was that? Not to me, which I guess is a good thing. Something happened to somebody. They shut down the freeway this morning about 7. And then it was open again, but then it was a lockdown. Thanks again for your patience. I seriously contemplated just canceling class and then y'all had your morning. And then I thought, you know what? I'm already on my way, and some of you all are probably on your way, and there's other stuff anyway. So the nice thing is we got a little chance for that video. Raise your hand if you were here for the video. I just needed to see if you were here. Great. I'll put that link online so you can spend some time. There's actually 2 videos by that guy Dan Pink. Right? One of them is that one, which is called Drive. Another one was a TED Talk, which is called Motivation. They're more or less the same thing. He's got a book that I think you can get on Amazon. I don't know, I don't have it. Called Drive. The writing, James put it up here on the board. The writing that I wanted you to do about what you think the problems are. What did y'all come up with? Let's hear a few. Yep.
Early childhood education.
Early childhood education. Say more. The problem is we have too much of it, not enough of it?
Not enough. I
Not
think
enough.
that if early childhood education were more widespread, it
Yes.
would even out the inequality of opportunity.
Sure.
And so all students would be prepared at least at the same level and have the skills needed to be able to succeed, say in kindergarten and first grade. And
So to succeed in school, we need to have more widespread success in school. We should have early childhood education. Raise your hand if you went to preschool in here. It would seem to, statistically, at least small sample, would seem to, right? Raise your hand if, I could ask the question about raise your hand whether or not you were in federally funded Head Start preschool versus other kinds of preschool. So a lot of kids in here were in preschool. All right, cool. Anything else? What's that? Yeah, thank you.
Trying to allow, like students track out a lot of students that to explore like even say high school.
Yeah.
We're all in classes at different times, and then a lot of the media students are just
So the problem is that the only students who get to do any fun exploring stuff, discovery stuff, are the more advanced students. I noticed you did the air quotes thing. Is that, yeah, what's that? Air quotes around advanced? So you're skeptical? This usually indicates some kind of skepticism. Skeptical of the very label advanced. Well, I wonder if there's other words we would put in quotes. I'm not gonna, you don't have to answer that, but are there other words we put in quotes? Advanced, smart, gifted, right? Yeah.
I have to see the overrepresentation of Black and Brown students in the courses, and then the underrepresentation of Black and Brown students in advanced courses, and then.
Did y'all hear that? Overrepresentation of Black and brown students in the remedial courses, lower courses, right? Or no, overrepresentation of those courses, underrepresentation in the upper level courses, yeah.
And then the school to prison pipeline, and with that, militarized policing on campuses that are in low resource.
Right on. Excellent. Good, excellent. Thanks for sharing. Others, yeah?
It's not really necessarily schooling, but I think there's an over-reliance on school as a provider of education.
An over-reliance on school as an education provider.
Parents are not spending as much time sitting down with their kids and supplementing the education they're getting from school.
What would a supplement look like? Do y'all hear that? Parents aren't spending enough time supplementing formal education. So what would a supplement look
I
like?
tutor
You're a supplement.
yeah,
Hi, nice.
and a lot of the times I go sit down and talk to the kids who are having difficulties.
Yeah.
And I work with kindergarten, and the
Yeah.
kindergartens who have their alphabet down, they always tell me that their parents sit down with them and help them go through their ABCs, whereas the kids who struggle with their ABCs are like, well, we're here at home, and we just play video games with my brother all day, and they don't.
So supplementing would be like more time spent with parents going through school-like stuff. So it would be a version of early childhood education, right? But this time with parents, right? Supplemented parents. Yes. Yeah, you had your hand up for a while, and then I'll go back. Yeah. Red hat.
Yeah, I'm thinking what I wrote is that it is so much more connected
Interconnectedness. They're not interconnected enough, is what you're saying.
We make it feel like, okay, math is this little block, and then you got English, and you got this, but there's no like overlay in between.
There's no connection between them, right? Math is done and you're on to English.
So if you want to do some story, like, you know, if you like math and art,
You can't do that, you gotta,
it doesn't know how to,
you never learn how they're all together. I think I do feel you, I like that, I feel you too, man. I feel you. You feel me? Oh, good, good, I like that. Nice, yeah, in the back. Motivate, I didn't hear I heard the first word, motivating, but not the rest.
STEM subjects.
STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, yeah.
For young women in particular.
I see, so this would kind of go with underrepresentation of young women in those fields, and maybe motivating students to take those subjects. By and large, this fits about what I expected. Not that the specific answers are what I expected. If I'd known what I was going to get, I wouldn't have asked, right? Fits about what I expected, which is that probably about 2/3 of you didn't need to take any of the first 4 weeks of this class to write what you just wrote. These are problems you think are problems that are out there. Right? I'm not going to ask you to abandon those problems. Actually, if you're not asking my personal opinion, I try to frame it as such when I give it. I actually think these are all problems that we ought to worry about. Right? I noticed that on Gaucho Space, part of the reason I asked this question is that on Gaucho Space and in other places, there's a growing impatience with the course already. Totally expected, also very common. A growing impatience with the course. Here we are, I hear versions of this. Here we are 4 weeks in. Nothing but bad news. Right? Nothing but problems. Nothing but crummy stuff. Nothing, and I haven't, by the way, I haven't even gotten to the criticism yet, but it feels that way, right? Like we're talking about how we got it wrong. Why can't we just spend a few minutes trying to figure out how to solve the problem? I'm going to address that very clearly right this minute, because that's your job. Okay? Because that's your job. Your job is to figure out the solution. If I knew exactly, I've got my approach. You can join with me in my approach. I'm going to start a school. You can join with me if you want. You don't have to. I'm probably going to get a whole lot wrong. Right? I don't know exactly what the solution is. If I knew that, then somebody, if there was an easy one, my suspicion is that for any of these problems, if there was something easy, right? If there was something that we could just flip a switch, somebody would have already figured out where that switch was, and somebody would already flip the switch. We've been working on some of these educational problems for decades, sometimes longer than 100 years. You can look at photos from Life magazine or whatever the magazines are in the early part of the century, and kids look exactly the same kind of bored that they are in school, right, as before. Now it's early childhood education. In the early 1900s, it was high school education. Get kids into school, that'll fix things. Get them into school sooner, harder, longer. Kids are dropping out, give them summer school. Right? They failed once, give them the chance to fit. No, I'm kidding. Sort of kidding. So this course is not going to give you solutions. I just want to be really clear about that. Don't wait expectantly. Okay, I am going to organize the last part of the course where the main assignment is called School in a Box, where you're supposed to design a school. Tell me and your colleagues and argue with each other, decide what goes in a box. You could be a container-sized box, could be a little box, could be, I don't know what size the box is, it doesn't matter. All the materials that you need to start a school go in a box. What goes in the box? I'm telling you now because that's what's going to happen. That's what the whole last half of the course is going to be about. You figuring out that if you were to design school from scratch, what would you, from scratch, for your children and your neighbor's children, can't forget that, right? You can't forget your children and your neighbor's children that you don't get to pick ahead of time. What school would you build from scratch? So I'm going to give you a chance to work on this problem. But the problem, the specific problem, that is what's wrong now, is not what you're going to be working on. You're going to be working on, if I could do it from scratch, what would I do? That's not a solution to a problem. That's a solution to like the big education problem. But you'll have a chance to do some kind of solving, addressing, designing, trying to figure things out. And I'm telling you right now, because I've been in the middle of this too for 25 years, I've been in the middle of this too, I'm promising you that the first things you're going to put in a box would build school exactly like it is right now. The things we think of putting in the box are things like desks and chairs. You've got to have books. Make sure they have laptops, you might say. If it was that easy, we could stop the course now and just have you go off. If I believed it was that easy. So given that probably about 2/3 of you wrote down, there's nothing wrong with writing down the problems that you think are important. But about 2/3 of you could have written down on the very first day exactly what you wrote down today. So what is this course supposed to be about? It's supposed to be about problem finding. Okay? We're going to have some time problem solving. The major part of the course is problem finding and problem defining. We need fewer black and brown kids in the remedial classes and more in the upper classes. We need more women in STEM fields and more men, frankly, in teaching fields in the humanities. Okay? We need greater interdisciplinary work. We need kids who don't have access to educational resources to get them. I want to question whether video games could be educational resources too. We want opportunities, circumstances, define it like we've defined it. Circumstances for people to do the most interesting kinds of things, including rise up whatever ladders are out there. If those are problems that you want to worry about, write that down. Just keep it down. I want the list to grow in this course. I want you to not only, for example, not think just like I think, but think about some of the things that I'm thinking about. That's something I can ask you to do. So, on the one hand, we need fewer black and brown kids. I'm going to add poor. Black, brown, and or poor kids in the remedial classes, in continuation school, etc., out of school. And more of them in the higher classes. More women in STEM fields. Yes. But at the same time, could we also wish for not that same divide? What would that look like? To not have remedial and higher classes. What would that look like? That's the kind of thing I want you to think about. Now the challenge about this, and I recognize it is so common sense, because when you walk into a school, I teach teachers a lot of my time, right? I'm in a teacher education program, so about 1/3 of my time I spend working with teachers. I am the 100% belief that I could throw any one of you in front of a group of kids from age 5 to 18 with no training at all, zero training. And some of you would be super poised at the beginning, some of you would not be poised at the beginning. It would be all over the map for about the first 2 weeks. But by 2 weeks in, all of you would look kind of like a teacher. You would pretty much do what teachers do. If you were in lower grades and the kids were out of control meaning out of their seats, and not listening to you, what would you do? You wouldn't applaud for them, that's not what that was. Nicely done, you're out of your seats. Yeah, you do something like, and then they, yeah. Yeah, right? I could do that, right? Or I'd sing a song maybe, crisscross applesauce, pepperoni pizza, and kids would go, You might go like this. You might do things like, if you can hear me, put your finger on your nose. And you'd say that until everybody had their fingers on your nose, and then you'd say, You might turn the light on and off. What would you do if you were in an 11th grade chemistry class? Is that in 11th grade? Some of you are like, it depends on what track you're in. All right, 10th grade chemistry class, whatever. Right, 10th grade chemistry class, and kids were totally disruptive at the beginning. What would you do? Don't think too hard, there's no right answer. What would you do? Would you go there and go, sorry guys. You couldn't leave, what would you do? Slam a book. Yeah. If you were really aggressive like some teachers, right? You go to the next person who was already asleep, and you go, that's not very loud. Loud. Or you drop a book. Or you clap. What else would you do? Raise your voice. You might even do the thing that we all know how to do because it's been done either to us or around us. You might lock eyes on somebody. James. Kids would be like, raise your voice. James. Or you might take the nice route. And you might say, James, thank you so much for sitting down nicely. Hoping that other kids would be like, oh, snap, I better sit down nicely. I did say that at the kitchen table one day. I said to my daughter, I said to Lily was messing around, throwing food around, and I said to her sister, I said, Sela, thank you so much for sitting nicely at the table. And Lily had turned to me and she goes, Dad, if you want me to sit nicely, just say sit nicely. Smarter than me. Fact of the matter, and then what would you do with your curriculum? You'd probably go out quickly and say, I need a grade book. And you go into a store called Lakeshore Learning Center, or whatever's in your neighborhood, or you go on Amazon and you find gradebook, and it would just look just exactly like the gradebook that I had in 1992 when I walked into my 5th grade class. Or you might get the electronic gradebook, which was slicker because it could add up the grades for you. And when you needed help, you'd go into the teacher's lounge and you'd probably do this. You'd probably say, you guys know James? And then half the teachers would go, oh, man, James, he never sits down. Or, the problem is, his mom's a drug dealer. Oh, that makes sense. Has anybody called Child Protective Services? You'd have pathways to solve problems. Look, if we want to do school like it is, then let's just go do it, because we don't need any training. We just need to jump into the already moving stream, and we can rebuild it just like it is. If we need some changes that are structural changes, then we should fight for those too, the ones we already know about. And chances are good we should fight from outside the system and inside the system if you care about this stuff. This course is about trying to see if there's something, no, not even trying to see, about saying to you, please look at what I'm looking at. I think we've missed something. Doesn't mean your problems as you define them are wrong or don't deserve your attention or shouldn't be solved. It's saying there might be other problems that, when we think about our own children and our neighbors' children, might come into clearer focus. Like, for example, I've said this as clearly as I can already. I believe, I just want you to think about it. And you've been doing a marvelous job of it, so I don't feel worried that you're just going to agree with me, because already some of you have been like various versions of, I think, Rayleigh's, Duque, whatever he calls himself, is full of it. We need the latter, let's be honest. But I'm asking you to think about seriously what gets lost when we organize things in a ladder-like fashion. What gets missed? And should we worry about it? And that was day one, leaves and ladders, trees, leaves, trees, and ladders. And we've gone more from there. All right, so you watched, so that's what we're kind of a reminder of what this is about. You're going to have a chance not to please me or your TAs. You're going to have a chance to add to whatever list you've already started about what the problems are toward the end of today. Okay? You're going to have a chance to revise, cross out, add to whatever you already wrote down. Okay? Why did I do this today? Because today is the last day where we try to establish some basic facts. Today's it. Today's the end, the last day of the first part of the course. Right? It's nothing like it's the end, the first day of the rest of your life. I don't have that kind of grandiose ideas. It's just the last day of the first part. And the first part of the course is trying to get some basic facts on the table. Like, for example, learning is wild. Who just said that? What did you say? Wild. Oh, you finished it for me? I feel you, man. It's good. You be together. We should go out and grab, after class, we should go to Woodstock's. It's too early to grab a beer. That'd be weird. Professor in there like, hey, can I have a picture? And learning's wild, and there's two parts of that, right? One of them is we're always learning, period, right? That's like part one and half of one. We're always learning, and we're always learning more than one thing at a time. We don't get to turn that off. And the second part of that learning is wild is that learning in the wild looks kind of wild, right? Unless we cut off the branches, when people are left to their own devices, it's not like they stop learning because there's no structure. It's not like when a child is learning to walk, they go, I'm just going to stop and somebody tells me what step to take next. They try stuff out. Without the threat, some people picked up on this, without the threat of if I fall down, somebody's going to call me, oh, maybe that child's just not a walker. Left to our own devices. In the wild, it's not like we stop learning. We go seek out, we're omnivorous. I said voracious. Memories of me hanging out with my grandfather. We're sitting around at lunchtime after a picnic. He loved picnics. We'd go out hunting and do our thing. That was what he did. And we were sitting around. He had a cocktail. I wasn't old enough for a cocktail. And he'd look at me and say, what do you want to do? He wasn't like, let's just sit. He said, what do you want to do? And we'd make slingshots and pitch pennies and find challenges. Can you jump over this? Can you shoot that? Can you? Because that's what we do. I don't think my experience is unique. I really don't. Matter of fact, I'm sure of it. 100% sure that when left alone, in the absence of some kind of disabling condition or disabling circumstances, we try to eat into the world. We try to make sense of it. It's what enables us to learn how to talk without anybody saying, your next word is dog, 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 da, dog. We have those conversations, but even if we don't, people learn how to talk. You don't need to take 3 years of Spanish to go learn Spanish. Go into a place where the people speak Spanish. And you probably won't go, I'll just hang out here at the airport till they come in with the Rosetta Stone software for me to... You can go out in the world and figure it out. That was just one claim. And if we take that claim seriously, that's what the course is. Lay out some basic claims, some basic facts that we can agree long enough on, and then we can try out and see if they make any difference. After today, it's going to be just trying things out and seeing what we get. First thing we're going to do is move it right into school. If we take these basic ideas into school as we know it, what do we celebrate? What do we worry about? What do we complain about? What are we glad about? What are we scared about? Okay. So what is today then? 2 things today. One, we're going to talk briefly about motivation. I want to make some basic claims about motivation. I'm not going to make a long argument about them. I think you can look at Dan Pink. He cites the research. I won't double up. I'm going to say a few new things about motivation. I'll get them on the claim boards maybe if there's time. If I don't get them today, then on Thursday they will be laid out, some claims about motivation. I'm also going to make one additional claim about ability that we ran out of time for on Thursday last week. Okay. Motivation. What does Dan Pink say? First of all, let's take what is his basic claim? Okay, his basic claim is that incentives, right? You all saw the RSA Animate where they're drawing on, that's the one you saw, right? There was another option, which is a longer YouTube talk he gave, and that's the one I asked for. Okay, so what's his basic claim? His basic claim is that we have the wrong idea about what motivates people to do things, what drives people, right? The economic model says that we give them incentives. I'll pay you, and the more I pay you, the better you'll do. And he says what? He says, briefly, that works very well on mechanical tasks that aren't very hard, right? Where they don't require, I would just add to it and say, he only had 10 minutes, it was a short talk, I got longer. I would just add and say, tasks that don't require any creativity, right? Tasks that are just stuff we already know how to do, that are kind of mechanical. And by mechanical, you can also think about stuff we've already memorized, right? If we already know, for example, our math facts, although that's a questionable one. Sometimes the people who get paid more perform well, sometimes they get do less well. But basically, mechanical stuff, the incentives work. His claim is about non-mechanical things that require some kind of cognition, right? Call it thinking, actual thinking, problem solving. That incentives like that don't work. Not only do they not make people perform better, they might actually make people perform worse, right? Statistics are in, is what he's saying. That if we pay people more, if the task is cognitively challenging, they'll perform worse. So, just take that into school for a second, right? If you already know your times tables, right? If you already know them, and you're just trying to get them done faster, incentives have a chance of working well. Might not be a bad idea. But if I'm asking you to understand how multiplication works, which for some of you is like, what do you mean how multiplication works? 2 times 4 is obviously 8. How it works? It's a fact. Yeah, but multiplication is actually a really interesting process. What does 2 times 4 mean? It means groups of 4 2 times. Multiplication is about groups, and multiplication is like adding but different. And try to explain that to somebody who doesn't have any idea what multiplication is. Some of you who are tutors have experience doing this. If you've never done it, it's not that easy. It requires some thinking. If we take Dan Pink's ideas in and we say, we want you to learn this fast, and I'm going to pay you, His claim, we could translate, is not for everybody. We have to be really careful. His claims are not everybody's going to respond this way. But by and large, that if I pay you to try to do something that you don't already know how to do, you're going to do worse. Now remember, hear my qualification, because some of you will do better. He's not saying everybody. He's saying some of you will do better, right? Or maybe he's not saying that, but I'm saying it so you don't get him wrong. He's talking about big numbers, big N. Those of you who are taking statistics, big N, a big sample size, which means there are going to be a few people who, if I pay them, do better. And I would bet that if I were to take a look at this group, I would bet that more of you than in the general population would respond well to incentives. I would bet. But I bet some of you still, even in this group, that is this group, what's this group? You're a high achieving group. Even in this group, I would bet that some of you, if I were to say something like, even something as simple as time savings, I'll pay you, some of you would actually slow down, even though you already know your time savings. Raise your hands if you think you might slow down if I try to pay you doing your time savings. Raise your hand. Don't be ashamed. That's a few of us. Right? Now, those of you who didn't raise your hands might be thinking, as you see those hands go up, well, all right, maybe they're just not as smart as us. Dog-eat-dog world out there, right? Can't win all the time. I would bet I could increase the number of people who raise their hands if I said we are actually going to play a game of Around the World. You guys know Around the World? I stand next to somebody. Dana's like, please don't stand next to me. I stand next to somebody and somebody gives us a single-digit multiplication problem. It's me and Dana head to head. Somebody give it to us. Give me a single-digit multiplication problem. Give it to me. What's that? Oh, no, I didn't even hear it. You can't do that. Yeah. You got one in your head? Don't say it. Just get one in your head. You got one? A single-digit multiplication problem. You ready? You don't need help. Let's just give it to me. 9. Right? She stays seated and I go on next. That's Around the World. Like she's avoiding eye contact. She's like, I think he's going to keep walking. Hope. Those of you in the middle are like, man, whatever. I know he's not going to go on the aisle. You get nervous, so I was like, excuse me, pardon me. So let's translate Dan Pink's ideas about motivation away from the job market and into schools, because you don't get paid for doing well in school. Actually, let me ask that question. How many of you did get paid for doing well in school? I did. How many of you got money for your A's? Raise your hands. Those that keep them up, and those of you who didn't, look around and give them stink eyes. Yeah, I did. You know what it was? I didn't get paid. I got to go to Charlie Brown's restaurant. Charlie, C-H-A-R-L-E-Y, Charlie Brown's, right? Where I got steak and the best blue cheese. I was like, man, I got A's and it was all about food. Which on the surface seems okay when you think about it. That's weird. They fed him nice when he did well. Was his middle name Fido? When you go into school, it's actually inside school, it's unusual that the incentive is payment. But it's not like there are no incentives. In school, and in school-like settings, the incentive is often the approval of somebody who's in charge. So forget money for a second. Let's translate it. What is the currency in school? I want to say it's praise and shame. Praise and shame. This one works on the basis of shame. Now you can say, no, it's about praise for the person who wins. But if you've been on the receiving end of this, it's shameful. Some kids figure it out early on. And they don't even try. And when they lose, they look around and go, man, fuck, this is stupid anyway. You think it doesn't happen? Walk into school, and if it's not that word, you see people push away. You've seen it. People push away from the desk and go, whatever. And we say, what do we say? We say you're not motivated. That poor kid's not motivated. Dan Pink's saying motivating people that way just doesn't work. It's going to work for some, but it just doesn't work. If we can translate his ideas about money And ideas about praise and shame, good job, and the corresponding, we don't ever say in school, man, you're really kind of dumb. We say you have a lot of potential. If only you put your mind to it. And then we write down on the report cards, your daughter's just not motivated. If we were being accurate, we say, my daughter's, your daughter's just not motivated to do the things, we got to qualify it, right? Your daughter's not motivated to do the things that I'm asking your daughter to do in the economic system that I've instituted in my classroom. That's pretty well qualified. You're not motivated to do the thing that I want you to do in the economic system that I've built in my classroom, built on, by and large, praise and shame. Now, we can say that sounds cynical to some of you. Please understand, I'm not holding your individual teachers accountable, and if you did well in this system, I'm not saying something's wrong with you. I nailed the system too. But it's not because I was smart or fast, because that system really worked for me. I was motivated, man. And I went home and I was motivated in like the home was the same deal. My parents loved me. It's not like they wanted good things for me. It just happened to work that what got it I got food. I got praise in school. The people who were lower than me got shame, and I got fed. Some of you just got paid straight up. Some of you got paid in a different way, which is like, you can have the car, but if you get bad grades. Right? This is just another form of payment. So Daniel Pink would say about this, he would say something screwy. Because that's not what motivates people to actually do interesting things. That's not what motivates people to innovate. What does he say motivates people to innovate? Autonomy, self-direction, right? Challenge. He calls it mastery, autonomy, challenge, and purpose. So you walk into school, and I make your purpose, I say it's about my purpose, it's not your purpose. Mastery is going to be measured in the terms that I give it, which is usually speed, right? And you can study it how you want, but what you have to do, I decided before you got here. So we wonder about motivation, right? So let's make this into a fact. It's easily blending into an indictment of school, and I don't really want to do that, at least not yet. This kind of motivation, incentive motivation, is good for ladders. It just is, especially where moving up the ladder, right, is about mechanical things. Just get the algorithm right. You don't need to understand what the quadratic formula is or means. Just be able to plug it in. Just do it. Not very good for this kind of stuff. I want to suggest the reason for this is that if you're exploring and discovering, just think about it. If you're exploring and discovering, but you're constantly having to look back to see if you're being approved by some authority figure, chances are you'll at least move slower. Think about old-time explorers. We can indict them for the wrongs that they did, but think about old-time explorers. Can you imagine if every 15 minutes they had to write a letter back to whoever was funding their expedition? They just never get very far. There's a certain amount of freedom in this that's rewarding. Now, to make this point, I won't continue to hammer it in too hard, but the right move to make next is just to think about when you feel the most motivated, right? And the different circumstances where you feel, by motivated, where you feel like you want to do something. You want to get moving. Because incidentally, I know that this isn't actually how you break up the word motivation in syllables. But it's a nice point, because the first part of the word motivation is what? Motive. We find that word in a lot of other places, don't we? Automotive. You know what automotive means? Self-moving. Motive is another word for movement. We think about motivation as a desire, but motivation is another word for movement. So think about it then this way. If it's the case that this kind of learning is good for a lot of things, this kind of learning is good, maybe good for some things, I don't know, you got to decide the terms in which, or the circumstances in which this is good. But if we know that motivating with incentives is good for this and not very good for this, if we use the metaphor movement, that word movement, moving in and across pathways like this is not very well supported by a simple incentive system. Right? Where moving in one direction up a line, up a ladder in a straight line, is in fact supported by, right? Let's start talking about motivation in terms of movement. And recognize that incentives, for example, are good with some things, but not for others. This takes motivation, by the way, outside of kids' heads and into the circumstances, doesn't it? It's harder to say that kid's just not motivated without a whole bunch of qualifying statements about the circumstances in which that child finds him or herself, right? Motivated by what to do what. Okay. Now we're going to go on to ability. That was the motivation talk. I'll make a claymore that we'll consider maybe revise over the next couple of 3 weeks. Ability. This is a version of what we had before. It's a slightly different version, but I want to propose this. It doesn't really matter. You're not going to get tested on the exact wording. This is really the claim about ability. We start out with the following: some people are smarter than others. That's common sense. And so what we get is some people are smarter than others, but smarts is probably not distributed along racial lines. Probably not. There's no evidence for that. So some people are smarter than others. We want to get the right smart people in the right places. Our complaint about schooling would be we need to get them in the right class, right? The right people have got to be in the gate class, and the right people got to be in the remedial class. Some people are smarter than others. And on last Thursday, I tried to make this claim, right? This is my version of it, the one that I walk around with in my head. You phrase it however you want. I just want you to engage with it. You can argue with it, but this is what I want you to argue with if you're going to argue, or agree with if you're going to agree, or think about if you're going to think. Some people are smarter than others, sometimes with some tools at some tasks. Sometimes with some tools at some tasks. You can see the parallel with what we just said about motivation, right? Some people are more motivated than others. Sometimes with some tools, with some tasks. Funny, isn't it, how we can say the same? I want to say that slower. Some people are smarter than others, sometimes with some tools at some tasks. Some people are more motivated than others, sometimes with some tools, with some tasks. Maybe we'd add with the motivation with some reward system, if there's a reward system in play. Okay, I want to say one more thing about, no, this is where we ended, right? Smart is a matter of fit. That was the shortest possible version, right, of this. Smart is a matter of fit. Whether or not you're smart depends on how you fit with the task and the tools. But there's one aspect to it that I want to make sure we don't lose. There's one aspect to it we cannot lose. And it goes something like this. Follow me now. I need you to listen to me because this is going to go kind of fast. I want you to think about this. Remember this? This is my niece, my wife's niece, writing this, passing a note under the door, telling her grandmother to hurry up. We'll come back to that in a second. We will come back to it. This is the map of the Apollo mission. Once the Apollo mission touched down on the moon, this is a map of the way that they explored. Got it? Looks pretty good. Lander, this is the lunar module. These are the paths that people and things took. This is Armstrong. Right? One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind, and he wanders around on the moon. Ooh. Those of you who think that this was a total fraud, I don't know what to tell you. Okay. This is the map. Amazing. If I superimpose that map on a baseball diamond, you gotta follow me. Just for now, follow me. Go with me. If I superimpose that map on a baseball diamond, it gives me a sense of relative size. Wow, what looked like a lot of exploration. If I put the lunar module on the pitcher's mound, that's not a lot of exploration, is it? What's the difference? The only difference is now we have scale, right? So if you put movement onto an existing map or scale, it looks different, doesn't it? But look at this one. If I put it on a soccer pitch, it looks different still, doesn't it? And we have a sense of relative size, but we also, imagine if this was not the Apollo mission, but this was a soccer team. You'd go, what? What was that? It would look like a group of 4-year-olds. You watch 4-year-olds play soccer? They would look kind of like this. What's the difference? The difference is if you put it onto a metric or a scale or a map, right, you got to follow the rules of that map. It's visible. In other words, it's visible in different ways. The same movement, when you put it on a scale or a field of play, it looks different. Now this looks kind of random. It's the same exact pattern. But now it looks like, man, can you imagine? Like, what would you say? You go, man, Armstrong, he barely even went 60 yards. He never even got his exploration near the other person's goal. He barely even hit the penalty box. Imagine if I put the map of the Apollo mission onto a racetrack. Now it would look like there was something wrong with those guys. What's different? The difference is not them. The difference is the surface that we imagine them traveling on. You follow? That's what's different. What does that mean in terms of smart? If I put you on a racetrack, some people are going to look faster than others. But if I take you off the racetrack, the question about who's fast disappears. Dana, go over there for a second. I want you to take 10 steps. I'm going to count them cadence-wise. 10 steps toward that wall. Okay, well, on my cue. All right? Ready? Somebody's go, Dana. Man, I know he got you in around the world, but don't worry. You'll get him on this one. Ready?
Yeah.
Go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Who did better? If the goal was to get to the wall, she obviously did better. If the goal was to understand this spot, I did better. Do you see? Dana, have a seat. You win this time, Dana. I'll get you on Social Studies Jeopardy. Hi. What's the point? I'm going to add to our definition of ability. We've already got some people are smarter than others, sometimes with some tools, with some tasks. Go back to this story. What made her look not smart wasn't, in this case, her task. She accomplished her task. It wasn't her tool. She got the tools. It wasn't her time. She did it brilliantly. What made her look dumb was her grandmother and everybody else who knew that when she enters the world, she's going to be jumping onto a racetrack. She didn't change. The ground changed. Some people are smarter than others, sometimes with some tools at some tasks. Smart is a matter of fit, and here's the addition. Some people are smarter than others, sometimes with some tools at some tasks when other people are looking and asking. Some people are smarter than others when I ask who's smart. I can find ways of dividing you into fast and slow, smart and dumb, if I just ask the question. I don't even need to manipulate the tasks or the tools or the times. I can just say, okay, who's smart here? And suddenly the game changes. And no matter what you do is measurable in terms of fast, slow, smart, dumb. How is this radical? Don't go away. How is this radical? You won't have time to write more. How is this radical? It's saying who's smarter than whom is a matter of who's asking who's smarter than whom, as much as it is the person who might be smarter than whomever else. That was the last fact. You have some reading for Thursday. It's called What Time Is It, Denise? And it's the first part of a lecture that's going to say, how do we know we're in school when we're in school? On your way out today, be sure you hand whatever you wrote before I got here, or as I walked in, hand that to your CA.